Despite our disparate upbringings, I, Olivia Pierce, a 29-year-old graphic designer, felt that I had found true love with Nathan Blackwell. I was ecstatic when he proposed after we had been dating for 2 years. However, Nathan smiled when his father dubbed me a gold digger during our engagement dinner. It all coalesced in that moment, without saying anything. I took off the 2-carat diamond ring, set it next to his plate, and left. If someone who was supposed to protect you failed, have you ever had to defend yourself? Click subscribe after submitting your article below. As I describe how I came to realize that my value was not negotiable, please let me know where you are viewing from. My dad left when I was 4 years old, so my mom, a committed middle school English teacher, reared me alone in Portland. Values were never in short supply, but money was. Mom gave me a strong work ethic and a fiery sense of independence, which have served as the cornerstones of my identity, as she told me while marking papers late at night. Your worth isn't determined by what you have, but by what you build. Those words became my motto as I pushed myself through design school, balancing 3 part-time jobs, a graphic design internship on the weekends, barista mornings, and restaurant hostess evenings. Right up until 2 in the morning, completing tasks driven by willpower and inexpensive coffee. During breaks, my classmates who were on holiday fretted about deadlines. I paid my tuition by working during the holidays. I began working as a junior designer at Henderson Design after college, earning just enough money to pay for my little studio apartment. I put all of my energy into developing my portfolio, living off of ramen and ambition. Every endeavor served as a springboard. Every client relationship is a pillar supporting my work. I rose to senior designer at the age of 27, gaining recognition through hard work and talent, but not via family or connections. I had secured the Meridian account with a large athletic gear brand the week before I met Nathan, which would help our boutique agency get recognition. Jessica, my employer, trusted me to lead the pitch, and when we won, the whole office rejoiced because it was a sweeter triumph than any that I could have received. It was gained by staying up late, taking chances, and not giving up when first ideas were turned down. I volunteered to create advertising materials for the annual Arts Alliance fundraiser, where I met Nathan. Curious about the event visuals, he came over to me at the reception with a champagne flute. I thought he was simply another rich donor, chit-chatting until he stayed with me all night, genuinely curious about my design methodology. Nathan looked over the software I'd made and commented, "Most people see a finished product. The 100 choices that led to its current state are never appreciated by them." His observation caught my attention for some reason. The work behind the work was visible to him. I paused when he asked for my number. His well-tailored suit, plus the fact that his family, the Blackwells, owned half the downtown real estate, shouted different world. His questions were thoughtful, though, and his gaze were gentle. The voice cautioning me about those who are born with silver spoons was, for once, disregarded. As I had expected, our first date was at a ramen joint I had indicated I like. Not some fancy restaurant. He did, however, come in a car that was more expensive than my yearly wage. He chuckled when I made fun of it. He told me that my dad was in the automobile industry, which I later found out meant that the family owned the biggest network of luxury vehicle dealerships in 3 states. Even though we came from various backgrounds, the conversation flowed naturally. Nathan was intelligent, inquisitive, and surprisingly grounded for someone who had never had to worry about paying rent. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of obscure films, loved trekking the trails of the Pacific Northwest, and adored art. Even yet, he occasionally made remarks that exposed his privilege. "Isn't it everyone's Hampton summer over the next few months?" I pointed them out to him, and he felt very embarrassed. Our bond grew stronger, without showing off his money. Nathan charmed my coworkers at the holiday dinner at my agency. When I presented design concepts with him, he listened carefully and provided comments that demonstrated how much he respected my knowledge. He brought champagne and toasted my landing a big campaign as if it were the world's greatest accomplishment. He remembered little details about my friends and his patience teaching me to ski, and I fell in love with the way his eyes crinkled when he chuckled. Following my admission that I had never been, he seemed to appreciate my work ethic, directness, and lack of interest in money accounts or family names. Nathan asked if I wanted to move in with him after we had been dating for 14 months. We selected a modern apartment downtown that was more expensive than I could have chosen on my own, but we made a compromise where Nathan paid the remaining amount without making me feel bad about it, and I paid what I could afford in rent. Nathan, my best friend Rachel, and my first doubtful friends were welcomed into my little social circle. Trust fund infants are problematic. In the end, Liv acknowledged that he appeared sincere. He spent a whole visit helping my mother repair her garden shed without complaining, and she warmed up to him after seeing me struggle. During those first 18 months, I was not exposed to Nathan's world very much. At a charity gala, I had had a brief encounter with his parents, who were courteous but aloof. His buddies were mixed, some were sincere, while others were obviously evaluating my value based on my lineage or lack thereof. At one boat party, Nathan stood up for me every time someone made a snooty remark about my quirky career. I didn't see it coming because of this. How was I able to? This man had supported me after my grandmother's death, rejoiced at my professional victories, and confidently discussed our future when he proposed to me when we were hiking at sunset to Angel's Rest, my favorite location with a view of the Columbia River Gorge. I said yes without hesitation. The ring was flawless. Instead of a gaudy rock that would have felt strange on my finger when he put it on, it was an emerald-cut diamond with a vintage feel that matched my style. "I don't want to be myself without you anymore," Nathan said. We celebrated in our apartment with takeout and champagne, called my mom, who broke down in tears of joy, and then went out for drinks with Rachel and my coworkers. Everything seemed to be meant to be, in harmony and ideal. Nathan proposed a traditional engagement dinner with his family the next week. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "They want to welcome you properly. They can't wait to welcome you into the family." I was excited, but also anxious. Even though we came from different backgrounds, I genuinely thought that our love had brought us together. I dreamed for hours about finally joining his family and being completely unaware of what that supper would truly show. Panic over what to wear began 2 weeks before to the engagement dinner. For supper at the Blackwell estate, I couldn't wear my regular trousers and blouses, with my latest student loan payment limiting our spending. Rachel went shopping with me. "How about this at Nordstrom?" Rachel displayed a blue cocktail dress, I said. To casual, recalling Nathan's mother's pearls and fitted luxury clothes. After a while, we discovered a forest green midi dress that was reasonably priced and suitable for the event. Nathan's smile didn't quite reach his eyes when I showed him that night. With hesitation, he answered, "It's nice, but perhaps something more formal." "Everyone is dressing up," Mom said. He gave me a link to a black luxury outfit the following day, which cost 3 times my rent per month. He wrote, "My treat," with a heart emoji. I graciously declined, saying I had already discovered the ideal thing. His answer, "Everyone left me feeling a little uneasy, and I simply want you to feel at ease." The week before the dinner was swiftly brushed aside. I looked into high society dining etiquette by watching YouTube videos about good conversation starters and when to use a fork. I rehearsed my answers to possible inquiries concerning my history, resolved to leave a positive impression. Simply be who you are. During our coffee meeting, Rachel gave advice. "It's their loss if they don't value you. They are merely defending Nathan." I stood up for it. After they learn about me, they will notice how well we work together. Nathan kept telling me that he was fine, though I saw that he had grown more preoccupied with checking his phone for texts from his mother regarding dinner plans. They will adore you nearly as much as I do. We arrived on the evening of the meal. Showers are anticipated throughout April. I had put extra effort into looking my best, with my hair done in sophisticated waves and my makeup applied flawlessly without going overboard. Simple pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandma matched the green outfit. When I came out of the restroom, Nathan whistled. He responded, "Beautiful." But his eyes began to wander to his watch. "Let's start moving." Dad detests tardiness. The Blackwell estate, a large Tudor-style mansion that made my boyhood home look like a playhouse, was situated on 5 well-kept acres in the West Hills. My stomach clenched as we pulled through wrought iron gates. As Nathan parked his Audi among the line of high-end cars, rain drummed against the windshield. "Are you ready?" He squeezed my hand for a moment before his face changed to one that was more formal, a public face I hardly ever saw in our private lives, and inquired. Before we could get to the enormous front door, Vivian Blackwell in a black cocktail dress emerged. Her earrings and throat were glistening with diamonds. She kissed Nathan's cheeks, her practiced smile never reaching her eyes. "Sweetheart, you're present. Everybody is waiting." Her eyes swept over me, taking notes. "Welcome, Olivia. No warmth, no cuddle. Simply awesome. Evaluation. Lawrence Blackwell. Tall like Nathan, but somehow harder, with edges not softened by kindness. Emerged in the entryway holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He clapped Nathan on the shoulder and shook my hand briefly before declaring that the happy couple had arrived. "We'd like to congratulate you. I get it." No mention of embracing me as a member of the family. No happiness for his son. Then Nathan's siblings showed up. Madison flashes a practicing smile, blonde and sleek like her mother. And Tyler, who at least made an effort to be really friendly by making a remark about the awful traffic coming from downtown. During our pre-dinner cocktails in the formal living room, I observed Nathan quietly removing himself from the situation both emotionally and physically. Madison questioned me about my small design project while he and his father stood talking business. She said, "You're so charming that you're creative. Expensive, swirling scotch. Is there a lot of demand?" Again, what was it? Visuals? Design of graphics? Yes, all brands require visual communication, and I made a gentle correction. I recently oversaw a campaign for Meridian Athletics that resulted in a 22% increase in quarterly revenue. "How diligent," Vivian interrupted, showing up next to us. "You put in a lot of work," Nathan said. After the wedding. "I think that will change. It hurt to assume that. To be honest, I adore my job. I have no intention of giving it up." Lawrence interrupted the awkward silence by making an announcement. Dinner was prepared. Despite only having 7 seats, the formal dining room's crystal chandelier, antique silver, and table that could accommodate 16 people frightened. Nathan was placed across from his mother, 4 seats apart, and I was seated between Madison and Nathan's Aunt Patricia. It felt purposeful to physically separate them, which prevented casual conversation. According to Nathan, "You went to Portland State." As servers brought out the first course, Lawrence started. An intriguing decision. It was obvious what the implication was. Why not a private university of distinction? I mentioned that I had won a scholarship. In fact, the industry holds its design program in the highest regard. "Is it?" With real surprise, Patricia questioned. "I've always had faith in the relationships formed at reputable schools. My 2 kids went to Yale." Naturally, the topic of discussion turned to memories of prestigious universities I had not attended, people whose family names clearly mattered, and summer houses I'd never been to. My isolation was increasingly obvious with each topic. "Do you recall last Christmas, when we all traveled to Aspen, Nathan was questioned by Madison. The cost of the private classes was well worth it." Nathan answered without looking at me. He claimed to enjoy the homemade customs at my mother's modest home, where we had spent last Christmas. By posing direct questions regarding my parents' occupations and social networks, Lawrence steered the discussion toward family ties. I proudly mentioned that my mother teaches English in middle schools. "She has made education her life's work." "How honorable," Vivian whispered, with a tinge of disdain. "What about your dad?" The question I dreaded every time. There was no photo of him. I can see that Lawrence and his wife looked at each other. Nathan brought it up. "You're an East Side native." As the dinner went on, the subjects became more awkward. Country club memberships, family trust funds, and subtle allusions to Nathan's ex-girlfriend Charlotte, who presumably understood their culture and came from a fitting background. Instead of standing up for me, Nathan either said nothing or shifted the topic. I brought up my recent promotion, but he cut me off with a story about his time in college. With every second that goes by, I minimize my accomplishment. Then Nathan, whom I believed to be familiar, appeared to vanish. replaced by a performer seeking the approval of his family. My mild enthusiasm about formally becoming a member of this family vanished, to be replaced with a mounting sense of uncertainty and estrangement. As the first course was cleared by servers, with a wine glass in his hand, Lawrence gave me his whole attention. "Tell me more about this career in graphic design, Olivia. Is it a rewarding pastime?" Heat rose to my cheeks when my profession was dismissed as a pastime. "Don't call it a pastime, Mr. Blackwell. I oversee campaigns for national brands as a senior designer." "How endearing," he said, obviously unimpressed. "And how much could someone make in that kind of job enough to live comfortably?" Nathan interrupted with an awkward laugh before I could reply. "Let's avoid discussing money during supper. Dad." "Nonsense," said Lawrence. "We are or soon will be family. These pragmatic issues are significant." He faced me once again. "I know that entry-level designers earn about $40,000, not nearly enough to sustain the way of living Nathan is used to. In actuality, my pay increased significantly following my promotion. The connotation, however, was obvious. My earnings paled in comparison to Blackwell's fortune. "I am entirely self-sufficient," I said strongly. "Nathan isn't going to pay for my life." Vivian's laughter sounded like glass shattering. "That's sweet, darling, but not realistic. You would need to drastically modify your professional responsibilities merely to meet the Blackwell social obligations." "I don't intend to quit my job," I answered, turning to Nathan for encouragement. He did incredible work while studying his plate live. "However, we haven't really talked about our long-term professional goals after marriage." It felt like a smack to be betrayed by him. We had undoubtedly talked about this a lot, and Dad had always encouraged me to pursue my professional goals. Lawrence gave his kid a nod of approval. Astute. "Some changes are necessary to preserve the Blackwell heritage. When we were married, my wife realized that," Nathan responded softly. "Dad, times have changed." Lawrence argued that some things are always the same. Family comes first. Always. Vivian changed the subject with ease. "In relation to family customs, we must talk about the prenuptial agreement. Our family lawyer has prepared a standard document, the casual dinner time reference to a prenuptial agreement." Like I wasn't there. Chilled me to the bone. Not because I didn't like the idea. I knew how to preserve wealth for future generations. However, Nathan had never brought it up in private first. "Later, we can talk about that," Nathan muttered, at last displaying uneasiness. "No sense." Lawrence dismissed him with a wave. "Olivia knows what she's talking about, doesn't she? Blackwell Holdings is a complicated company. Standard protection, real estate portfolios, dealerships, and a number of trusts. Of course I did, but I was no longer hungry." Leaning forward, Madison refilled her wine. "Do you recall Charlotte's family? They got it right away. Her father works at Wilson and Crane as a partner." Nathan made an uncomfortable change. "Madison, that is irrelevant. Just saying." Madison went on. "These conversations are easier when people have comparable backgrounds." The subject of Nathan's previous relationship with Charlotte Wellington, whom I had heard about but knew very little about, came up. They apparently split up a few months before Nathan met me after 3 years of dating. Vivian remembered how upset the Wellingtons were. The wedding had been basically planned by them. What a fitting match. With every statement, I learned more about Nathan's downplayed past and expectations I couldn't meet. As supper went on, I remembered troubling times when I'd written off Nathan's hesitancy to introduce me to some of his friends, his evasive justifications of why I wasn't invited to family gatherings, and his nuanced criticism of my attire for particular outings. Already loose tongues became even more so as the drink flowed freely. Stories about the Blackwell heritage, expectations for the next generation, and barely disguised remarks about upholding particular standards were all covered by Lawrence. Lawrence said Nathan will take over the Northeast expansion next year. Relocation to Boston is necessary. Naturally, I was unaware of this. Although we talked about possible prospects, Nathan had never brought up Boston or any firm plans. My mother, friends, and career were all in Portland. I glanced at Nathan, but he averted his eyes and seemed suddenly fascinated by his wineglass. My heart shattered once more. The family settled into cozy routines that completely shut me out when waiters brought the main meal. I couldn't comprehend the inside humor. Allusions to individuals I had never encountered. I hadn't shared those memories. To put more distance between us. Nathan leaned physically away from the table in the direction of his mother. Next month is the Wellington fundraising. Vivian made a casual remark. Charlotte explicitly inquired about Nathan's attendance. Without asking, he said, "I'll check my calendar." Tyler, who had been largely silent, made an effort to be included. Olivia, did Nathan mention the vineyard that is purchasing a prime position in the Willamette Valley? Vivian interrupted me before I could respond. Elise Harrington and I had been discussing the wedding. The Riverside Country Club in June would be ideal, I said gently. We haven't decided on a date yet, or a location. As like I hadn't said anything, Vivian went on. There are already 300 people on the guest list, primarily close family members and significant business partners. My water almost swallowed me. Nathan and I had spoken about having a small, private ceremony with maybe 50 guests. Nothing we had planned resembled the wedding Vivian described. The daughter of the Harringtons played in a 12-piece orchestra, Lawrence went on. A grand event with growing tragedy. I came to see that they were organizing a wedding to further their social goals, rather than our bond. Even worse. Nathan sat in silence, providing neither assistance nor correction. I attempted to keep my dignity as I felt more and more invisible during the lunch. The conversation swiftly shifted to subjects that emphasized my outsider position whenever I mentioned my life, hobbies, or experiences, regarding certain expectations regarding family gatherings. Lawrence made scathing remarks. Charlotte's social connections were brought up time and again by Madison. Nathan, the guy who had taken my face between his hands and vowed to be my companion forever, remained silent while Vivian talked about wedding plans without consulting me. While Lawrence twirled the last of the cognac in his snifter, the waiter arranged beautiful chocolate soufflés before each of us. Every minute was agonizing as I counted down the seconds till my escape, and the evening had turned into an endurance test. Lawrence started off with the phony jollity of someone who is going to say something purposefully offensive. The elephant in the room needs to be addressed, in my opinion. Even the clinking of silverware stopped, and the table became silent. Despite his alcohol consumption, Lawrence's eyes remained sharp as he focused entirely on me. I take pride in being straightforward. Olivia, what we have today is the result of generations of Blackwell construction. I have a duty as well as a right to know what you intend to do with my son. My intentions were accelerated by my pulse. Indeed, intentionally, he set down his drink. In addition to his inherent charisma, Nathan is a valuable asset. Naturally. Questions arise when a young woman from your background abruptly joins our community. There was a lingering innuendo. Nathan, Dad, eventually spoke up, but he wasn't very strong. To silence him, Lawrence held up a hand. Here, someone needs to be straightforward. The timing is questionable. Nathan's role in the organization is going to grow significantly. At age 30, his trust fund fully vests, and all of a sudden, you're here, under the table. My hands shook. You have my undying love, Mr. Blackwell, not his wealth or status. Lawrence gave a scathing, contemptuous laugh. That's what everyone says, sweetheart. Let's be honest, though. What are your specific contributions to this match? It's more than just a fascinating tale of a poor girl catching a rich spouse. The temperature in the room appeared to drop by 10 degrees. Nathan murmured feebly. That's not fair, Dad. Is it not? Lawrence posed a difficulty. Think about the facts. No ties to family. No meaningful assets. A creative career. Yet it pales in comparison to the potential our family offers. This is what we'll call it. His eyes were fixed on mine as he leaned forward. You're a swindler, More astute than most. I'll give you that. However, the pattern is clear. There was complete quiet. The charge lingered in the air, raw and vicious. I looked across at Nathan, awaiting his defense, his anger. He rejected his father's brutality right away. Rather, Nathan laughed, not an uneasy or apprehensive laugh, but a genuine laugh of agreement. She does always order the most expensive wine when we go out, he said, giving his father a look of approval. My blood became icy. As I took in what had just transpired, time seemed to slow down. In that crystal-clear moment of insight, the guy I had committed to marry and who had vowed to support me had not only failed to defend me, but had joined the onslaught. Innumerable minor betrayals came into sharp relief. Nathan's comments on my adorable apartment before we moved in together, his advice about updating my wardrobe, his hesitation to introduce me to some people, and his dragging me away when I wanted to talk about art with his father's coworkers. Suddenly and painfully, I realized that Nathan had never truly embraced me as an equal. He had anticipated ultimate absorption into his world on his terms and had appreciated my uniqueness as a curiosity. The 2-carat diamond that had once signified our future seemed suddenly weighty, and it now symbolized a basic misinterpretation of my identity and values. The fury inside me was concealed by the exquisite serenity. The ring slipped off my finger. Everyone's attention was drawn to the movements. The tiny clink was deafening in the silence as I set it next to Nathan's plate. Olivia. With a sudden realization, Nathan began, "It's too late." I got up slowly. The napkin was placed right next to my unfinished dessert. As I moved my chair back, its scratch across the hardwood floor broke the tight silence and made my legs feel unattached to my body. All of them. I straightened my back, picked up my little clutch purse, and turned silently, following. It resonated with every step toward the dining room door. My ears throbbed with my heartbeat. However, a curious sense of serenity led me to the front entrance through the foyer. Someone Nathan probably stood behind me, and the chair scratched. My beloved. Dramatic exits won't alter reality, I was called after by Lawrence. His words drifted down the corridor. As I reached for the door handle, Nathan caught up. Hold on. Liv. Dad has consumed too much alcohol. He means nothing. I looked over at him. My silence has a peculiar power. His face was recognizable. I'd woken up to that face innumerable times. The face I had assumed I would grow old next to now appeared to be unfamiliar. Let me drive you home. Olivia, we can discuss this. Once. I shook my head. Stepping out into the cool night air, I opened the heavy door. Silently and definitively. The door shut behind me. The world was pristine now that the rain had stopped. As I made my way to my car, stars appeared through the broken clouds, and every step I took me more away from the life I believed I wanted in my automobile. Steadily gripping the steering wheel. For the first time in hours, I breathed deeply. Later, there would be a flood of tears. But I felt a weird lightness in this moment. My hand was no longer burdened by the ring, the future free from limitations imposed by unachievable standards. I turned on the car and left the Blackwell estate without turning around. Inside my flat, the 20-minute journey home was a haze of calm roads and streetlights. Fortunately, it was still mine because after moving in together, we kept both locations. I kicked off my heels and sat back against the couch on the dark floor of my living room. My phone was constantly buzzing. Nathan, 7 calls were not returned. 12 text messages. Give me a call, please. Dad was acting inappropriately. I don't think that about you, you know. It was merely a dumb joke. You're where I'll be over. This is something we must discuss. You're going overboard. That final one destroyed my heart. And I started crying uncontrollably as everything fell apart all at once. The knowledge that my dreamed future was based on sand, the humiliation, and the treachery. I sent Rachel a text, participation, supper, Catastrophe. I need you. She showed there 20 minutes later, fiercely loyal and carrying a bottle of wine. I cried and laughed at the ridiculousness of it all as I narrated the evening, pouring copious glasses. Rachel sulked at that utter bastard. Both of them. I can't get that laugh off my mind. I acknowledge it. It's as if they made a secret joke about me. Since they did, Rachel stated plainly. Although wealthy lads like Nathan pretend to be rebellious by dating ordinary girls, most of them anticipate that you will eventually change to suit their family's needs. My phone was still buzzing. Nathan became more and more desperate in his communications. Just talk to me, please. I'm not inside your structure. You're home. I know that. Your vehicle has arrived. 5 minutes. All I'm asking is that, after typing her response on my phone, Rachel returned it to me for approval. Not this evening. I require room. I sent it. After work, I turn off my phone. Rachel and I went to my apartment together and collected Nathan's things. A less involved task than anticipated. He hadn't made many traces on my personal space throughout our 2 years together. I relived our relationship from start to finish while I was lying in bed by myself that night. There had always been the signs. When Nathan meets his coworkers, he remarks on my inventiveness as though he's trying to explain my profession so they'll understand his astonishment at my ability to speak intelligently on politics or economics, exposing his underlying presumptions and his tendency to handle any financial situation in a way that is ostensibly generous, but actually keeps me reliant. The morning came hammering at my door, bloodshot eyes, rumpled clothes, and a huge bouquet of flowers surrounded Nathan as he stepped outside. He pleaded for 5 minutes, please. I let him in against my better judgment. He put the flowers on the counter, keeping us at a distance. I apologize, he said. Dad was inebriated and unsuitable. I ought to have stopped him right away. However, you didn't. Calmly, I answered. You chuckled. It was tense laughing, an awkward response to an awkward circumstance. I gave a headshake. No, Nathan. I understand the distinction. You concurred with him. That is untrue. His desperation became apparent. The remark about the wine was a dumb joke. By putting myself under the bus, I was attempting to defuse the situation. He combed his hair with his hand. Anger is growing. The pressure in these circumstances is beyond your comprehension. Sometimes going along for the moment is simpler than making a fuss. Make a scene. I spoke steadily. It's not making a scene to defend the woman you purport to want to marry. It's the very least. I'll speak with them, he said. I will correct this. Dad will say he's sorry. This has nothing to do with your father saying sorry. It concerns you. Nathan walked around my tiny living room. What should I say? In your opinion, that I made a mistake? Okay, I made a mistake. After 2 years, you're prepared to discard everything after making one mistake. His betrayal incited indignation. The night before, I had been too surprised to feel it. One error, Nathan. While your whole family destroyed everything about me, you sat in silence. My history, my profession, and my worth. You allowed them to organize a wedding that had nothing in common with our conversation. Boston, prenuptial agreements, and other evident plans you have for our future were not mentioned. We can resolve all of it, he demanded. Those are merely specifics. They aren't specifics. They are essential components of our identity and desires. And I learned last night that I'm not what you want. It's a version of me that satisfies the standards of your family. Nathan's face changed from remorse to annoyance. You're not being fair. I decided to deny you. Against the expectations of all, picked me. I said it again, as like I should be appreciative. Nathan, that's the precise issue. You think you're helping me out in our relationship. I did not intend that. He appeared to be in real agony. I adore you just the way you are. No, I answered softly. You adore the thought of me as the independent, creative lady who isn't like the people you usually hang out with. However, when that independence clashes with your world, you don't truly respect it. Nathan took my hands and knelt in front of me. I'll show you incorrectly. I'll confront them. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I was filled with sadness as I looked into his familiar eyes. I'd always know that wasn't your first instinct, even if you did that right now. When Nathan departed, your immediate impulse was to go with them, assurances that everything will be fixed. The next round of interference started behind him. Vivian was the first, showing up at my office 3 days later without warning. At reception, a sophisticated woman dressed in high-end clothing asked for me, and heads turned. As I escorted Vivian to our tiny meeting room, my supervisor, Jessica, arched an eyebrow. "We've had enough of this." She didn't introduce herself. "Nathan is inconsolable." "That's unfortunate to hear." My answer was brushed aside by her finely manicured palm. Families and miscommunications occur. Although Lawrence might be blunt, his worries stem from wanting to keep the family safe. "Mrs. Blackwell, calling someone a gold digger isn't straightforward. It's false and offensive." She let out a sigh as though I were being really challenging. Maybe the wording was bad. The fact that marriage is about more than just feelings is still important. It's about understanding one's function and having compatible backgrounds and ideals. I returned the ring for precisely that reason. Vivian's exterior cracked a little. "Nathan has more promise than you might think. He requires a partner who strengthens rather than weakens his position," I said. "Then he should find that person." "I'm not the one." She left with a veiled apology, saying she hoped I would be more sensible. In a professional email, Lawrence offered me a job at the Blackwell Foundation that would allow me to follow my artistic interests while yet retaining a respectable social status. Should I reconsider? I was more repulsed by the implied bribe than by his initial rudeness. Unexpectedly, Madison followed up with a surprise coffee invitation. She appeared to be truly introspective, unlike her parents. She stirred her latte and said, "I was terrible that night. However, you should be aware that Nathan and Dad have never argued as much as they did after you left. It's the first time I've seen him confront him." "Too late, too little. Though the information made me hesitate," I answered. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but that does not imply that it is not growing." Tyler, who called instead of ambushing me in person, had the most illuminating conversation. "Nathan is a mess," he started. "However, I didn't call to accuse you. To be honest, I wanted to express that I understand. There was no forgiveness for what Dad said." "I appreciate you recognizing that," Tyler went on. "This is what you might not understand. All of us were brought up with unrealistic expectations. Nathan is the heir apparent and the golden child. He has lived his entire life trying to please his father. That does not justify treachery." "No." Tyler concurred. "It doesn't. However, it's not easy to change that practice of pursuing approval. Ask me how I know." I came away from the talk feeling contemplative yet unaltered in my choice. In a last communication, I explained to Nathan why his actions had been inappropriate and made it plain that respect was a given in any relationship. I would contribute to his answer, pages of pledges to make changes, to show himself worthy and to confront his family, demonstrated his continued lack of understanding. Instead of really investigating why it had occurred in the first place, he was preoccupied with correcting the result. I felt like I was recovering from surgery, so I didn't respond for the first month after calling it quits on my engagement. Painful, but healing-related. I went through the days in a daze, acting professionally but emotionally detached. The most difficult nights were spent lying awake, reliving events, and wondering if I had overreacted. I began attending Dr. Langley, a therapist, at Rachel's suggestion, and he assisted me in identifying patterns I had been missing. It sounds like emotional manipulation, what you're describing. During our third session, she pointed out that it is expected that you feel thankful for being selected. Your independence is being subtly undermined, being expected to incorporate him into your life while excluding him from his entire existence. But I insisted that he loved me. I'm still having trouble dealing with the loss. "I don't question that," she said. "However, love devoid of respect turns into ownership rather than a relationship." I reasoned that their remarks had lingered with me, shedding light on previous exchanges. Nathan's constructive criticism of my appearance before we met his friends, his contemptuous tone when I voiced worries about blending in, and his belief that I would eventually put his career ahead of mine. I re-established contact with acquaintances I had inadvertently cut off during my relationship. Tasha, my roommate from college, came for a weekend and gave me the perspective I needed. Do you recall declining the internship in Chicago since Nathan believed the distance would be too difficult? That was not you, she reminded me. I knew an Olivia who would never allow someone to restrict her chances. When I finally told my mother everything, her wisdom was especially consoling. She brought homemade chicken soup and unwavering support when she drove up from Portland for the weekend. She said, "I'm proud of you." I was surprised. Walking away from something that appears ideal on the outside but is flawed on the inside requires a great deal of bravery. I feel like I didn't succeed. I acknowledged. No, she forcefully corrected. The most crucial thing, acknowledging your value, was accomplished by you. She told me stories about her own relationship with my father that I had never heard before, about how she chose to trust in it despite warning signs, how she degraded herself in an attempt to live up to unrealistic standards. The hardest lesson I've learned is that you don't have to shrink to love someone, she said. Genuine love allows you to develop. My work became my haven. Design's creative challenges provided both a diversion and a goal. Jessica saw my need for a positive focus and gave me the task of leading our newest campaign for an eco-conscious clothing business. A surprise opportunity to be considered for our agency's new creative director post resulted from the project's success garnering industry notice. More creative control, greater responsibility, and noticeably better pay would come with the position. I might have been hesitant to consider how such a hard job might impact my relationship prior to the engagement dinner fiasco. I now gave it my best shot, giving the interview presentation my all. You have a fantastic idea for the department's future. Later, Jessica told me, "You're more confident and concentrated than I've ever seen you." I understood that she was correct. My professional instincts have sharpened without the subtle undercurrent of trying to balance Nathan's demands. Thoughts came more easily. Presentations seemed more genuine. I ceased questioning design decisions that could appear too daring for the Blackwell universe I was attempting to inhabit. Nathan persisted in trying to make amends, but less frequently. My office received flowers. Letters arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten. His apparent metamorphosis was reported by mutual friends, refusing to attend family gatherings, confronting his father at work, and even seeking therapy. Even while I knew that too much harm had been done, there was a part of me that hoped he might make a difference. Once broken, trust couldn't just be put back together. It was hard to avoid him on social media. Despite the fact that I had unfriended Nathan, his life periodically showed up on my page because our circles overlapped. Pictures of him at charitable functions. Announcements from businesses regarding the Blackwell expansion were once unpleasant. Charlotte Wellington's hand resting comfortably on his arm in a photo of him and her at a gallery opening. Surprisingly, that picture hurt, not as much as anticipated. Instead of feeling like a new wound, the agony seemed remote, like recalling an old hurt. 3 months after giving Nathan's ring back, I became a member of a local designers collective that got together once a month to exchange ideas and encourage one another's artistic development. I didn't realize I was missing something until I joined the community of independent creatives. Respect-based professional connections as opposed to hierarchical or collectively connected ones. I got to know Angela, a talented UX designer who ended up being my buddy and mentor. Her 15 years of experience in the field provided insight. I appreciated it, especially as I was debating whether to take the creative director position or look into other possibilities. Leaving behind what appears safe can sometimes lead to opportunities you were previously unaware of. "What would you do if you weren't afraid of making the wrong choice?" she said over coffee. Her query struck a deep chord with me. What had prevented me from pursuing some of my goals? To what extent had I unwittingly restricted myself in order to preserve the peace of our relationship? I started journaling as a component of my recovery. Every night, I recorded both minor triumphs, unforeseen delights, and agonizing insights. A change I hadn't completely recognized throughout the breakup was exposed when I went back and read through entries from the early days after it to more current ones. Raw pain and questioning were evident in early entries. Did I discard something that would never be replaced? When the pain subsides, will I regret this? Later ones showed increasing clarity. I realize now that I haven't expressed regret for my beliefs. This week, once, my views were offered by progress without any qualifiers or concessions. The directness was adored by the client. I recalled how Nathan responded to his father's remark with thankfulness for the reality that came to light before I married into it, rather than with anguish. I was not only surviving, but truly thriving 6 months after the engagement dinner. I was appointed creative director without sacrificing style. My renovated abode mirrored my aesthetic. Weekends full of things I would set aside. Rachel and I went hiking, lessons in art. My mother had always dreamed that I would volunteer at the literacy center. Nathan was still in the background of my mind, but it was no longer the center of my attention. I could listen to our mutual acquaintances talk about him without feeling upset. His name stopped being a source of remorse or rage and instead became just a name. I understood that this shift marked the start of real healing, not the end of suffering, but its conversion into something positive. Every cry, every restless night, and every second of sticking to my guns had created a priceless, unwavering trust in myself. I signed the contract for a bright apartment with a river view 8 months after leaving the Blackwell home. Although the facility was more expensive than my prior location, my promotion allowed me to finance it without going over my budget. The day of the move felt formal. Tasha, Rachel, and coworkers assist with moving boxes and furniture, christening the area with champagne and takeaway afterwards. Rachel painted my new living room and added amber light while toasting to fresh starts and a sunset. The apartment was more than just a new location. Every design element, from the contemporary sectional sofa to the gallery wall of regional artists' creations, was a reflection of choices I made only for myself. Never give in to the preferences or expectations of others. No calculating what would match a certain social image or impress prospective in-laws. During this time, my bond with my mother grew stronger. Weekly phone calls evolved from cursory updates to real dialogues. I went to Portland more often, and she came more often. Our relationship developed into the mature friendship that neither of us had ever been able to maintain. During one visit, my mother surprised me by saying, "You remind me of my mother." Even when the outside world tried to convince her otherwise, she maintained this unwavering sense of who she was. "Now I see that in you." I was genuinely moved by the observation. My grandmother, a woman who operated her own bookstore in the 1960s, had been my boyhood hero, even though the general public assumed she would be happy being a wife and mother. As I became comfortable in my capacity as creative director, my professional development continued. As a result of our creative ads, our agency grew and attracted bigger clients. I assembled a group of people that shared my beliefs, had a variety of viewpoints, and were egoless and collaborative rather than competitive. The most surprising thing happened with my designers collective. A friendly discussion about freelancing turned into a business plan, with several of us pooling our knowledge to start a boutique agency that specializes in sustainable branding. I couldn't resist the creative freedom and purpose alignment that the possible collaboration offered. In the midst of these improvements, Nathan and I unavoidably met. Our city's creative community was too small to permanently avoid intersections. The interaction took place at the annual Advertising Association dinner, which I attended on behalf of our agency. I was dressed in a bright blue jumpsuit that mirrored my evolving style, confident, unique, and unconcerned with traditional norms. Nathan and his coworkers were standing close to the bar, but he broke off their chat when he noticed me. He had changed after 6 months, getting a new hairstyle and losing a little weight, as well as his stance. "Olivia," he whispered, moving warily closer. "You look fantastic." "Thank you." "Nathan, how are you?" It was an ordinary query with tremendous significance. My future had previously been this man. He was hardly unknown now. "Excellent." "Better." He paused. Although I've stepped aside from overseeing the Boston expansion, it is still progressing. Oh, my reaction was tinged with genuine astonishment. I became aware that I was carrying out my father's plan rather than my own. His smile was a mixture of knowledge and regret. Some lessons are expensive. We had a quick, courteous talk that was colored with both of us acknowledging what had been lost and what we might have gained in the process. Nathan mentioned something that stuck with me as we were leaving. I failed to be the companion you needed, and you deserved better that night and every night before. No justifications, no fresh efforts at peacemaking, simply admitting the truth. I felt the last component of my recovery come together as I left that encounter. A serene realization that everything had transpired precisely as it should have replaced the fury that had sometimes returned. It hadn't been a straight line from that terrible dinner to this peaceful moment. I had been able to identify patterns from my own background that had left me vulnerable thanks to therapy. My need to establish my value, my propensity to over-accommodate. I was afraid of coming out as demanding or challenging if I stood up for what I needed, because the gold digger charge capitalized on my fears of class distinctions. Dr. Langley's advice had been especially helpful in helping me understand how deeply it had affected me. In spite of my complete confidence I had internalized, she pointed out that staying at the meal was the most impactful part of your story. It was sticking to your guns in the face of demand to go back to what you knew. She was correct. I had grown more confident in myself each time I turned down Nathan's progressively frantic attempts at reconciliation. Every professional accomplishment, unaffected by concerns about how it could affect the expectations of others, had restored my faith in my career. Through sporadic coffee dates, the unexpected bond with Madison Blackwell gradually grew. Her viewpoint on growing up under Lawrence's strict demands put Nathan's actions in perspective without justifying them. During one meeting, she explained, "We were brought up to think that appearance is more important than authenticity. Nathan had to reevaluate everything after he struggled to unlearn that you were leaving. I said that I couldn't stay to support him on that trip." "I understand," she stated plainly. "It's working because of this." 10 months after that fateful supper, I started dating Alex, a commercial photographer with whom I had worked on a number of projects. From mutual respect to friendship to something more, our relationship developed naturally. There is no greater difference between this connection and my time with Nathan. Alex never once gave me the impression that my experience or profession were a liability rather than a strength, asked sincere questions about my work, and took my viewpoint into account when making decisions that impacted us both. Above all, I had a stronger sense of self and defined limits before I started this relationship. No more downplaying my accomplishments to keep from frightening someone. Don't be afraid to voice your problems or wishes. No more putting up with tacit rejections of my priorities. Alex and my mother clicked right away when they met, highlighting yet another distinction. Because she was significant to me, he approached her as someone worth getting to know rather than as a burden to bear or a history to overcome. My career just kept getting better, with 3 founding partners and an emphasis on businesses that prioritize social and environmental responsibility. The boutique agency concept evolved from concept to business plan to reality. It was difficult to leave the stability of my role as creative director. But often the most precious things we create come after stepping away from what seems safe. As my mother had sagely noted, our first significant customer was a cutting-edge, eco-friendly clothing line that shared my principles and presented a creative challenge. More significantly, the campaign we created helped advance corporate processes while also garnering industry recognition. I thought it was important to reflect on the path from that embarrassing dinner to this moment of genuine achievement. If Nathan had stood up for me that evening and we had gone on with the engagement, I would have spent years trying to shape myself into someone who could fit the Blackwell mold. But I realized the deep gift concealed inside that traumatic experience. The true betrayal wasn't when Nathan smiled when Lawrence labeled me a gold digger. The true treachery had been more covert. Nathan's implicit hope that I would one day become someone who fit into his world. According to his rules, leaving a partner who didn't stand up for me wasn't the only reason I walked away. It has to do with not giving up on myself. Every action since rebuilding my professional life, enhancing friendships, building a house that embodied my principles. That first act of self-respect has been strengthened by opening up to fresh love. The most important lesson was not about class distinctions, relationship red flags, or even defending yourself in dramatic situations. It was the silent, potent realization that when sacrifice necessitates sacrificing your fundamental truth, it turns into self-erasure. True partnerships in friendship, business, or love provide an environment that is conducive to growth rather than requiring diminishment. Advocacy and protection are components of true love. Indeed. More importantly, though, it involves having the freedom to be who you are without having to constantly apologize or translate. The respect and dignity I had demanded that evening weren't extravagances. They served as the foundation of any worthwhile connection. As I stand here today, surrounded by relationships that uplift rather than drain me, I am creating a business that is consistent with my principles. Dinner gave me a terrible clarity for which I am thankful. The most precious things we acquire can occasionally appear as losses. Have you ever been forced to turn down anything that seemed ideal on the outside but wasn't for you? Leave a comment below with your tale. Someone else might need to hear about your experience today in order to discover their own courage. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you found resonance in this narrative, I appreciate you listening to my story, and never forget that you are always valuable.